Welcome to Shadowproof. Evidence first, noise last.
They've been thinking about a lot lately. Every day, we are all busy with different things. Some are busy with work, some with studying, and some with taking care of their families. On October 19, 2017, Robert Warwick, an astronomer at the Haleakala Observatory, during a routine observation, suddenly discovered an unusual interstellar object. Its speed was extremely fast, even emitting flashes of light continuously. So Robert became very curious and checked previous data, and then he was surprised to find that this interstellar object was not approaching the solar system, but in fact, it had arrived in the solar system over a month earlier. Earth's gravitational force is immense. If it were pulled into the solar system by the sun, in fact, after finishing his research, Robert specifically named it Oumuamua, meaning the first messenger from afar. In other words, Robert was essentially certain that Oumuamua was not a normal meteoroid but an intelligent object. The key point is that not only the discoverer thought so, but also a Harvard astronomy professor, Avi Loeb, once publicly stated that he was sure Oumuamua was an alien spacecraft. He even clearly stated that many scientists don't want to admit this because they dislike accepting new things. And today, this video of ours will continue to challenge the limits of scientists. Because not long ago, I discovered that Oumuamua might not be the first interstellar object to visit the solar system. In fact, at this very moment, our solar system is filled with various interstellar aircraft carriers. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not making this up. Astronomers have already announced these interstellar aircraft carriers. And the only question is, who exactly created these interstellar aircraft carriers? What is their purpose in the solar system? Most importantly, do scientists on Earth really not know about the existence of these interstellar aircraft carriers? Are you ready? Today, let's talk about the fleet hidden in the solar system monitors. On March 19, 2002, a US-led transnational arrest operation was carried out in London, England. When armed personnel broke down the door, they arrested a hacker named Gary McKinnon and charged him with crimes spanning decades. So what documents did McKinnon hack that made the US so tense? It turns out that the place he hacked into was not an ordinary unit but the US space agency NASA. And the reason he did this was that since childhood, McKinnon had been extremely fascinated by aliens. Even in 1979, he personally witnessed a UFO. This strange encounter not only increased McKinnon's curiosity about UFOs, but also made him start to believe that NASA must be hiding many documents related to UFOs. And the only way to confirm whether NASA was hiding documents was to directly hack into NASA's system. Initially, he didn't make any astonishing discoveries. Until over a month later that McKinnon finally noticed a file named. What surprised him was that after opening the file, he was amazed to find a cigar-shaped UFO. At that moment, he was surprised to see a cigar-shaped UFO. At that moment, he was extremely surprised because this meant NASA was indeed hiding information from the public. But right at this critical moment, he suddenly noticed his mouse moving, even though he wasn't touching it. Oh no, I've been caught. This was the first thing McKinnon thought. And then, not long after, he was indeed arrested. Fortunately, McKinnon is British and was arrested in Britain, so if the US wanted to try him, they needed Britain's cooperation. But on this point, Britain didn't seem very cooperative. So to this day, McKinnon has not been extradited to the US. As account, back then, besides seeing UFO photos, he also discovered a very strange file named. Inside, besides a list of names, there were dozens of aircraft carriers. Notably, these aircraft carriers were not moving on the sea but in space. Solar System Monitor. I know this name sounds like something from a movie, but strangely, to this day, the US is still trying every way to capture McKinnon. The US even accused him of causing the largest military computer attack in history. So how much of what McKinnon said is credible? Solar System Monitor. So with this question in mind, I continued researching documents and made new discoveries. For many years, many people have believed that the earliest history of aliens dates back to the Roswell incident in 1947. This incident not only led the US to confirm the existence of aliens but also made many people firmly believe that Earth is not the only planet with life. But actually, before the Roswell incident, there were many strange stories we don't know about. The US Navy. Does everyone remember in this video, I once introduced a person named William Hopkins? This person once served in the US Navy, then moved to work at the Douglas Research Institute and participated in many of NASA's secret missions. In fact, back when Armstrong landed on the moon, Hopkins himself was also on the moon at that time with an unmanned loop, and personally witnessed the entire process of Armstrong's encounter with a giant UFO. And this is the real reason why the live broadcast was interrupted. This issue is very interesting. Anyone interested can revisit that video. Secret Space Program with Tonkin. Michael Salla focused on designing an unsolved mysterious sound. It turns out many things are not as simple as they appear on the surface. When you know all the facts and connect them, you will discover another horrifying secret. And everything began with a concealed bloody battle. On August 26, 1946, 1 year after World War II ended, the United States secretly dispatched 13 ships, 3 free aircraft, sending 4,700 scientists, military experts, and soldiers to Antarctica and this is the extremely famous high jump program. From the beginning, this program was doubted by many for 3 main reasons. First, World War II had just ended. Why was the research so urgent and conducted at this time? Second, the US said this was an Antarctic research mission, but they brought an aircraft carrier. Rather than calling it a research team, it could be said this was an army. The most suspicious thing is that this mission was suddenly and urgently cancelled not long after it began. At that time, the US explanation to the outside was that a reconnaissance plane had accidentally crashed. 3 people on board unfortunately died, so it was cancelled urgently. However, Hoang Kent tells us a different story. It turns out that from start to finish, the high jump program was not in Antarctica, but to hunt down remnants of the Nazi forces. And the reason he knows this is because between 1942 and 1946, Rick Carter assigned Thong Ken to handle the role of transferring information from a secret Nazi spy. Simply put, Thong Ken would periodically meet the spy sent to the Nazis, and then bring the information the spy obtained back to the US. And then, during one spy report, Thong Ken noticed something extremely strange. Spy told Thong Ken that Germany was researching a new type of aircraft. Thong Ken didn't quite understand, so he asked the spy to draw the materials he had seen. Unexpectedly, Thong Ken ended up seeing an anti-gravity aircraft. Contrary to the usual laws of aircraft dynamics, Thong Ken explained that conventional aircraft have a power source, but the flying saucer the spy drew had no propellers or jet engines. Without these things, meaning no power, how does this aircraft fly? Because this matter defied common sense, initially, the US didn't pay much attention to this intelligence. Until February 1942, after the Battle of Los Angeles, the US woke up to discover that there really are anti-gravity aircraft in this world. Therefore, after realizing that, the US began tracking down the previously overlooked information, and was surprised to find they were not the first country to know about flying saucers. Since 1933 in Lombardy, Italy, there had been a flying saucer crash. At that time, Italian leader Benito Mussolini was very interested in this matter, even establishing an organization specifically to research this, and also pointing out that the maker of the saucer was a secret German organization, the Vril Society. The head of the organization was Maria Ors. Back then, she used extrasensory perception and successfully contacted aliens, and created the flying saucer with their help. Flying saucer. Yet Maria Warsick not only knew the shape of the flying saucer but also successfully built it. Of course, such a big matter, how could it be hidden from Hitler? Sure enough, later Hitler found Maria and forced her to help him build flying saucers. Among them, the flying saucer that crashed in Italy was made by Maria. And the reason this flying saucer couldn't be used was because Maria knew Hitler was there, so she adjusted the inside of the saucer, which is why it ended up crashing in Italy like that. However, Hitler was no easy opponent either. Later, he found another group of extraterrestrials willing to teach him technology. In other words, the extraterrestrial forces on Earth could at least be divided into two. Communicating with Maria belonged to the benevolent extraterrestrials, while those willing to teach Hitler were part of the malevolent alien faction. And right after Hitler made contact with those malevolent aliens, he finally understood. Earth was not the only place to compete for dominance. Beyond Earth, there was the solar system and the galaxy. The vast world exceeded imagination, so why should he focus on seizing the position of Earth's overlord? However, by this time, World War II was nearing its end, and building flying saucers required time. Long before that, Hitler had already sent people to Antarctica and built a hidden refuge there. Thus, Hitler eventually went to Antarctica to develop. To make America abandon pursuit, he even staged a fake suicide. Originally, this plan was perfect enough. But no matter how cunning Hitler was, he couldn't anticipate. American spies had long known about his cooperation with extraterrestrials. So when news of Hitler's suicide emerged, America promptly launched Operation. This program mainly involved immediately taking in Hitler's scientists, because America believed these scientists must know about flying saucers. However, what surprised America was that during Operation Paperclip, they discovered 5,000 Nazi scientists had mysteriously disappeared and might have gone to Antarctica. Therefore, before the high jump in 1946, under the command of Major General Richard Byrd, they hastily went to Antarctica to hunt. But they didn't know that after arriving in Antarctica, what awaited them were dark weapons from hell. Time still stops in 1946, when the American troops finally arrived at Moreland, Antarctica. In documents released by the United States, we can clearly see scenes of numerous icebreaker ships entering, as well as some C-47 transport planes on the. However, according to Tom Cann, just hours after this photo was taken, they were attacked. Suddenly, the originally calm sea surface saw the emergence of 27 They didn't fly in from afar but rose vertically from the seabed. At that moment, witnessing all this firsthand, the American military truly could. I know the story sounds increasingly unbelievable as it goes on, but strangely, such unbelievable information was confirmed by the mission leader, Major General Richard Byrd. In a Chilean newspaper dated March 5, 1947, Richard bluntly told reporters he believed America should take defensive measures to prevent invasion by enemy aircraft from the polar regions. This statement was extremely peculiar. We need to know that the North and South Poles have extremely low temperatures year-round, and generally, almost. So how could enemy aircraft come from there? Not only that, Richard's next sentence said the reason he issued such a strange warning was due to his Antarctic expedition, where you learned an important lesson. At the end of the article, it even concluded that the era of solid security at the North and South Poles had. People find Major General Richard. Not only Richard's confirmation, but Tom had also once revealed that in 1943, spies had eavesdropped on the matter. That the former head of the German Navy, Cardonis, once said the submarine fleet had built an indestructible Shangri-La for Hitler elsewhere in the world. In 1944, spies again reported that the German Navy knew the safest place in the world, so if necessary, they could easily take leaders there. Upon hearing this information, America immediately summoned the expert of the National Geographic System, who, based on information provided by spies, drew a map of Antarctica, and then they discovered that what Cardonis said was true. There indeed was a hidden safe place in Antarctica. Why did Operation High Jump carry an aircraft carrier from the start? Because America already knew there were enemies. The important thing is that in Antarctica, the American military didn't just encounter. In the second assault, even the Nazi Bell appeared, beloved from legends. During flight, it emits blue light. According to KGB records, the Nazi Bell can disable electronic devices within a 200-meter radius. Undoubtedly, after 2 consecutive attacks, the technologically inferior American troops quietly withdrew. However, it wasn't that they gained nothing at all. During the battle, America once shot down a flying saucer. What was astonishing was that the pilot of this flying saucer was not a Nazi but an alien. At this point, America finally understood that the reason the Nazis had the ability to build flying saucers was because aliens. Therefore, after the high jump program, the United States began actively searching. At the critical moment in 1947, an extremely important UFO crashed in Roswell, USA. It is said that from that UFO, the US also discovered a surviving alien. However, not long after, this alien died. But ultimately, through reverse engineering of the left-behind UFO, the US developed many technologies. Thus, during that period, American technology progressed by leaps and bounds. Not long after, the famous State Route 71 Blackbird reconnaissance aircraft was born. And to study the flying saucer more thoroughly, in 1955, the US established Area 50. 3 years later, in 1958, NASA was established. Our protagonist, Mr. Tom Pan, joined the Apollo program around this time. During the live broadcast, the moon landing crew witnessed aliens there with their own eyes. And shortly after the difficult moon landing, NASA canceled subsequent landing missions. However, according to Tom Pan, NASA never truly stopped going to the moon, but merely moved this program underground. This is precisely the origin of the secret space program. More importantly, according to our investigation, the reason NASA could implement the secret space program so strictly is because from beginning to end, NASA was not a normal scientific organization, but a defense agency under the US Navy. In 1958, US President Eisenhower signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act. Astonishingly, Article 375 of this act clearly states that NASA is a US defense agency. Therefore, any information they deem classified is not to be included in any reports. Simply put, NASA has the authority to refuse to disclose information they do not wish to reveal. But not everyone complied with this law. Donald Heer was a computer graphics engineer who, from 1967 to 1981, worked at a secret NASA agency named Building 8. According to her account, NASA frequently encountered UFOs during missions. And she knew this because she often saw unedited photos. One day in 1970, as usual, Donald walked into the office. At that time, a colleague was editing photos. Donald looked closer and discovered a UFO. At that moment, Donald was extremely surprised and blurted out a question. "Is that a UFO?" And he smiled at me and said he couldn't tell me. I knew he thought it was a UFO, but he couldn't tell me. So I asked, what would he do with this information? And he said, we always had to remove them before selling them to you. In this interview, Donald even mentioned that, based on what she knew, many people who participated in NASA's space program later disappeared, because they had all joined the Solar System Surveillance Program. Not only Donald here mentioned this program, but also the hacker market and we mentioned at the start of the video. They all confirmed the existence of this plan. The key point is that all three of these individuals stated the main purpose of the plan was to combat aliens living and hiding on Earth. During the process of gathering materials, we compiled the descriptions from these three individuals about this to help everyone better reconstruct the original state of the secret plan. It turns out the Solar System Surveillance Program is one of the secret space programs, signed by President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, after NASA announced the cessation of moon landings. This plan primarily uses modern technology to scan and monitor for unauthorized spacecraft entering the solar system. In the early stages, the US Navy established 8 fleets to protect Earth, and Mr. Tom Ken was the person responsible for designing the aircraft. In his book, he even published the initial design drawings. According to Tom Ken's account, the total length of the aircraft carrier is 1.62 kilometers, with triangular space fires lined up beside it. Normally, they would leave the mothership to patrol, and when returning, they would do so through the side doors of the mothership. These aircraft carriers were primarily handled by 3 designated companies: Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing. And the manufacturing location is still being selected in a very large cave east of Washington Mountain, Utah. Of course, such massive projects cannot rely entirely on Earthlings to complete. During this process, the US Navy also received assistance from Nordic-type aliens. This type of alien resembles Earth humans in appearance, but their lifespan extends up to 2,000 years, and they belong to the peace-loving faction in the galaxy. Therefore, when the US Navy wanted to build an Earth defense system, the Nordic-type aliens came to assist. The key point is, the US not only cooperated with aliens, it even jointly launched the Solar System Watcher program with the Soviet Union in 1985. In other words, according to Tom Pan's account, the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union had already ended in the 1980s. However, is this possible? Strangely, we even see online a video where the then General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev, personally confirmed an important dialogue that President Reagan once told him. Thus, through the efforts of various forces, in 1984, the first spacecraft of the Solar System Watcher program was launched. It is said this spacecraft could carry 300 people at once. When I saw this part back then, I was also somewhat skeptical. Because most conventional spacecraft today can only carry 3 astronauts. Even the space shuttle can only accommodate 8 people. Even Elon Musk's latest rocket can only carry up to 100 people at once. How could it possibly carry 300 people as Tom can claim? And right now, I found important evidence in President Reagan's diary. The Reagan Diary. Thank you for doing so, because on page 334 of Reagan's diary, it clearly records that on Tuesday, June 11, 1985, he had lunch with 5 top space scientists. And it was learned that the US space shuttle could already send 300 people into orbit. Reagan even said that the development of astronomy was like science fiction. Oh, could the Solar System Watcher program really exist? But the problem is, even if the US could really build multiple 1 to 2 kilometers long aircraft carriers simultaneously, how can they secretly launch those aircraft carriers into space without anyone noticing? That's not just about whether people would discover it. If there really is a fleet in the solar system, wouldn't. And so, to answer these questions, we continued searching for materials. And then we discovered that someone really did see a big secret in the solar system. John Leonard Watson is an amateur astronomer and also a telescope enthusiast. In 2007, he personally modified telescope equipment to achieve a level close to the diffraction limit in optical resolution. And after the telescope was upgraded, he unexpectedly saw the International Space Station. Comparing it with photos released by NASA, it's clear he successfully modified the telescope. And then he continued exploring space. Not long after, he saw things like space planes and spy satellites. After searching for Earth's low orbit, John decided to venture deeper into space. And immediately after, strange images began to appear continuously. And clearly, these images were not asteroids, nor were they space shuttles, and certainly not satellites. On the contrary, they also resembled the sketches I own can. Could this possibly be the fleet of the Solar System Watcher program? Because in some images, we didn't even see a control room resembling a space aircraft carrier. The most surprising thing is that these so-called spacecraft are very numerous. Even John himself said that many times he thought the objects he saw were stars. But when zoomed in, they were not stars. Online, some even believe that some fleets might belong to aliens. After all, in the past, many aliens have mentioned having spacecraft near Earth. Before President Trump's term ended, his son once questioned the media. Can you tell everyone the truth about the Roswell incident? At that time, Trump responded like this. They told you what I know about it, but Roswell is an interesting place, with many people wanting to know what's happening. So you're saying you could declassify and release it? I'll have to think about that. It seems the truth is already quite exposed, so whenever you have free time, look up at the sky a bit. Who knows, maybe one day you'll also discover that some stars are actually not stars. So, what do you think? Do you think the Solar System Watcher is real? Do you believe there are space fleets everywhere in the solar system? Feel free to comment and share. Thank you for watching. If you'd like, you can subscribe to catch the next videos. Or if you have more time, you can watch other videos from this channel.
If the proof convinced you, subscribe and open the next case.